Right, let's talk Manchester United now. In the week, Ruben Amorim lost his job at Old Trafford. Sam Wallace in the Sunday Telegraph has been focusing, Johnny, on Roy Keane's assertion that Ferguson, Sir Alex Ferguson, is hanging around Old Trafford like a bad smell, and maybe he's advising maybe too much about who the next manager should be. He is saying, is Sam Wallace, that the pundits' claim smacks only of a grudge he cannot let go. But he goes on to say that the Ferguson legacy remains omnipresent. There is Darren Fletcher recounting how he called his old manager before taking on the first team job, an instinct that felt similar to Ole Gunnar Solskjaer worrying about parking in his former manager's space. What's your take on this? Roy Keane is implying that Sir Alex Ferguson is heavily involved in all the processes at United. I think you're hearing different, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean, look, I guess my take would be United have 99 problems and Fergie ain't one. Bit corny. No, just, 999. Look, the long and the short of it is he's seen on television when the camera pans to the stands, but the days of him being closely involved are gone. He's not even paid by the club anymore. He's there because, as Sam writes in the piece, he's an 84-year-old man who's following a football club that he loves. And in that time since retiring, I don't think he's barely made a pronouncement about the state of the first team, what kind of job the manager's doing. There's an interesting piece by Paul Hayward, who knows Ferguson very well. He wrote his autobiography, one of his autobiographies. Points out that Fergie's union background means that he was very conscious of not being seen like Matt Busby was seen, as interfering with managers. His presence is there as a symbol of what United used to be, and that's the issue, not his actual involvement. But Roy Keane knows how to put a tackle in, doesn't he? And that comment was classic Roy. Obviously, their animus goes back to Roy leaving the club in 2005, and perhaps opinions that I don't think Roy's ever going to budge from. But this isn't about Matt Busby's situation. For one thing, the Busby situation was he was a sort of intimidating presence to sort of novice managers or kind of managers that were seen as not big characters. But United have had some of the biggest characters in the dugout. They've had Mourinho, they've had Van Gaal, they've had strong character like Amorim himself, pretty stubborn guy. The thought that Fergie is there kind of influencing them or intimidating them is just one of Roy's TV moments, but I don't think reality.
Miguel, Johnny mentioned Paul Hayward's piece there. In The Observer, it says one call to Sir Alex exposed the deep malaise at the heart of Manchester United. And talking about that call that Fletcher made, he says when Fletcher tapped Ferguson's number on his phone screen, the call travelled across all the waste of the last 13 years to the genius behind 13 Premier League titles, 5 FA Cups and 2 Champions Leagues. It resurrected the principle that Ferguson might have something useful to say about what should happen next. And he did, by articulating something the Glazers and parts of the Ineos ownership don't understand. The job now, is what he said to Darren Fletcher, is to do what's best for Manchester United. What Manchester United are doing at the moment is bringing in an interim in Darren Fletcher, talking about bringing another interim after Darren Fletcher before appointing a permanent manager in the summer. Is that what is best for Manchester United?
Yeah, definitely. Also, it gives them the kind of space to actually think about this clearly, which I think really is required. I mean, I think one of the biggest issues of the modern Manchester United, and this feeds into a lot of themes of the show today, I think they've got to decide what they actually want to look like as a club. And I mean, like in terms of, especially with one so obsessed with identity, it doesn't really have a football identity. And if you pick one, and this is essential in modern football, then everything flows from that. And that was one of the issues of the Amorim appointment, that really in the summer of 2024, and there is context for this because the new leadership was coming in, key figures were in place, but in the summer of 2024 they really should have taken it almost as starting from scratch and thinking about what do we want this team to look out. Instead they ended up, I suppose, clumsily persisting with Ten Hag for viable reasons, and then going for Amorim, who's probably more wedded to a specific style than any modern coach, which kind of goes against that sort of best practice that we're talking about. And just like Sam touches on this in the piece, or at least kind of, I think this is a bit of what he's getting at. I think where the Ferguson thing is significant, I suppose, it's not about his influence, because I mean, I think compared to Busby, as Jonathan was saying, Busby was this kind of, this almost ferocious presence there, even if it was kind of implicit. Whereas Ferguson, by contract, it almost feels like he's kind of a cuddlier figure in retirement. Than
Busby had the office in the stadium. The manager could literally know that Samat's sitting two or three doors down.
Yeah. And just on the kind of, I suppose where the phone call is significant is because, as a colleague said to me during the week, I won't out him, but he said, what would have happened if Ferguson said no? Would he have,
not for you, Darren.
Yeah, like, I mean, it just kind of shows a little bit the absurdity of this, and it's like United are now in a position, and this is where there are echoes of kind of the 17 years between Busby, where they're looking for the next Messiah.
Yeah,
that are the next, and there's almost biblical themes to it.
Yeah,
Jackie, just on that, look, it looks like it's going to be either Ole Gunnar Solskjaer or Michael Carrick. There are two things at play here, aren't there? Who's the better coach and who's going to help Manchester United in that short term until the end of the season, but also from an optics perspective. And are they the same thing? Who would be the right choice at this stage?
Well, they tried Ole Gunnar Solskjaer more significantly, of course, than Carrick. So I would absolutely say Carrick out the two. It's weird, isn't it? Because Manchester United, Sir Alex Ferguson's not the problem here. He's the figurehead. He's the guy that brought so much success, that has helped create and amplify the fan base that was already there. It was already a huge club, of course, before him. But what he did was extraordinary. Him sitting in the stands is not the problem. The problem is that it's been an absolute shambles ever since he left, with lurching from one style to another, to a different manager to another, and just going with no kind of serious clue as to what to do next. And it all comes from the top, doesn't it? And it wasn't just that Sir Alex Ferguson left, it was that David Gill left, and the way of doing things was exposed in their absence. And the fact that the first signings under David Moyes, the key ones, the likes of Fellaini from Everton and Juan Mata from Chelsea on a free, kind of low-hanging fruit, they really struggled to really kick off the whole process with a new identity from then, and they've not gone back to that. So in terms of the two managers, I would absolutely say Carrick, give him a go, because I don't see why you'd go back to Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. But on the Fergie, Sir Alex Ferguson, sorry, quite disrespectful, front, listening to Peter Schmeichel, legendary goalkeeper, the other day, who's saying that no, Sir Alex isn't involved at all. He speaks to him a lot, and he said he's not. He's just there in the stands, but he's not having a say at all in what's going on. And why shouldn't Darren Fletcher pick up the phone to him? It's getting ridiculous now. You can pick up the phone to whoever he likes. You're not going to not pick up the phone to somebody who's been there and seen and done it all.
Johnny, your piece dramatically headlined the death of the manager in the Sunday Times, and one paragraph I want to pick out: the poor souls in dugouts have come to seem as dispensable as everything else to the regimes running clubs today. With their 5-year plans and PR, they leave us in no doubt who the visionaries are, and for fans still used to rallying round managers, it is disquieting. It's not gone, by their own admission, how Ineos would have wanted it to since they've taken over. Under their management, Dan Ashworth has come and gone. Keeping Eric Ten Hag was an admission of a mistake, and the Ruben Amorim experiment hasn't worked because after 14 months he's no longer there. There is big pressure now on Ineos to make sure that they not only get the interim right for the rest of the season, but the permanent one as well.
Oh, they have to, and you've catalogued some of the mistakes. The thought that Jim Ratcliffe, 2 years on from arriving and promising to restore Manchester United to world dominance, could be starting a year with Darren Fletcher in charge, just kind of says everything about where the project's gone. And that's with full respect to Darren, who's a very promising coach and a really good figure. But it's an admission for Ratcliffe where we are. I think what I was trying to get to in that piece was, we're in an era now where we're seeing anger from supporters now directed at not at the managers necessarily, but at the boards, at the owners, at the execs. And one of the reasons for that is that they have taken control of the football clubs, and they tell us how clever they are. Ineos, Jim Ratcliffe, Dave Brailsford have been telling us for years how clever they are. So this is a consequence. And in modern football, that position of the manager has been downgraded and reduced. There are only 5 managers now in the Premier League. All the others are head coaches. Everyone wants to have a plan, a strategy and a structure, and the head coach just slips into that. Well, fine, but if it goes wrong, you're going to take the heat. So this is the time for Ineos to finally prove their cleverness, I guess, and get that appointment right, because it has to be somebody that will bring this great club back to life. They've done a lot in the background. They've put some really quality people in big positions. You know, Mike Sansoni, the head of data they brought in from Mercedes, Christopher Vivel, the technical director in charge of recruitment now, really well rated. They've invested in Carrington. They've done what they would sort of say was the necessary groundwork for the club. But unless you can show that the decision making in the key positions right, and empower that manager a bit, perhaps not be afraid if that manager's got a strong character and a bit of power, then all the other good stuff isn't going to work for you. And it's interesting they've gone back to looking at ex-Fergie players as their interims. It's not just sort of, let's go back the past and remember what Fergie did. I think one of the reasons is these are people who are seen as knowing how to handle Manchester United. You know, the unique scrutiny, pressure, culture of Manchester United. That's why you go back to Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. That's why you go back to Michael Carrick, because one of the things they found with Amorim was looked at the profile, and this isn't Captain Hindsight. At the time, I thought they were doing the right thing. One of Europe's top young coaches, yes, totally wedded to a system, but a guy on the up. Everyone in Portugal's telling you this guy's a poet. He's such a great communicator. He oozes charisma, and he walks in the door at Manchester United, and because of all of the factors, that disappears, and those good human qualities become things you maybe don't want.
He was tactically intransigent and didn't have the players he needed when he came mid-season. But that's on the people who are appointing him. They're looking at a guy who plays this. This is the way he's had success. This is how he's going to play. Those players at Manchester United don't work with that. It was surely doomed to failure from the start, and that's on the people who appointed him.
Well, I think they thought Amorim was going to flex, and Amorim had sort of intimated to them that I will come in, I'll do my 3-4-3, and I will grow to playing more of a Manchester United style. And he never did. And his last game against Leeds, 6 players who are defenders at heart on the pitch with 2 holding midfielders. Against Leeds, you know, Wolves, with all respect, it was 5 defenders and 2 holding midfielders at home to the bottom club, matching up against the bottom club. And I don't think it's about formations, and I don't think the identity of Manchester United is a mystery. It's a club that plays attacking football. It's a club that sets out to entertain, that sets out to thrill supporters. So a bloke, it doesn't matter what formation he wants to put them in, but a bloke that wants 6 defenders and 2 holding midfielders on the pitch against a team threatened relegation isn't your man. And as you say, maybe you should know that before appointing him.
I do where exactly what we're talking about with Frank a little bit, where that's where the weight of the club starts to almost kind of disrupt someone's thinking, because it's almost like they lose clarity and lose sight of what it's about. And there was this kind of odd obstinacy to Amorim, and from again, I was touching this earlier with Frank, it's from speaking to people all week about these issues, no matter someone's previous status or profile at a club where there's less exposure, as I said, you just don't know until they get in the door at a club like this. And it's interesting, I mean, you mentioned the structure, and I think when you speak to people on the ground at Carrington, they would say it is night and day even to 18 months ago. United have changed in that regard. But this is where this next step is so crucial, because you were getting at this a bit in your piece. You do wonder whether, kind of that clean structure and a pure head coach can work at a mid-level club. Yeah. But at the biggest clubs, precisely because of the weight, they do actually need the sort of personality that can carry this and also be a bit of a figurehead because of the institutional memory and the effect of what these clubs are. There is something bigger about that.
Yeah, and that's what's interesting, that, as I say, we've got 15 head coaches out of the 20, but the 3 top clubs are the ones where the manager has the biggest say and the biggest personality. Guardiola at City, Arteta at Arsenal, and Unai Emery at Villa. Maybe that tells you something.
And also, and also don't forget that it's only managers in this country that ever front up at press conferences. So you can call them a head coach, and if they're the one that doesn't necessarily have the power, somebody above them's going, we want to buy him, we want to sell him, we want to buy him, we want to sell him. The poor bloke who fronts up at the press conference is the one that has to defend these decisions, even if he didn't want that player, and he didn't want to sell that player, and he didn't particularly want to play this formation that he's been told by somebody higher up he's got to play. This, I think, is why we're in such a mess with so many of the top clubs all clubs in the Premier League in this country.
And also, in terms of some of those clubs you mentioned, they actually, it's not just about the manager, I think, as well. It's also the structure is different. I mean, if you look at Pep Guardiola, okay, it's changed now with Vienna. But one of the reasons City worked so well for so long is because, I mean, the technical director, Chiki Begiristain, is Guardiola's longtime friend, his former teammate, who he also feels he owes his career to because he gave him a chance at Barca. At Arsenal, Arteta was very early on. It wasn't kind of a top-down structure. He was included in a football leadership team where it was a collaborative effort. And then with Emery, obviously, I mean, the club basically said to him, like, here's the keys to Villa. Draw us your ideal club.
Yeah, technical director there, sporting director there is Roberto Arlabi, who I think's played with Emery. Comes from his hometown, you know, like a lifelong friend, and before that it was Monchi, and they've allowed him, as you say, the owner gave him a blank sheet of paper and said, draw your club. Look, I do think those days are gone in general for football because of the complexity, but finding that balance where you get the strong character for a top club, strong character manager, and empowering the vision, that does still seem to be the way that you achieve success.
The relationships are absolutely key. There's no point in having somebody who's thrusting a certain player, a certain type of striker that's not the profile the manager wants onto it. It just makes no sense whatsoever. So those relationships are absolutely key. The sporting director, the manager, if they are aligned, they don't have to love each other as human beings and go around each other's house for dinner, but they do really have to have a footballing understanding together of where they're going. Gary
Neville says Carlo Ancelotti is his choice. Give me a name, each of you. Who do you think would be the best Manchester United manager permanently? Well,
Sebastian Hoeneß has been mentioned from Stuttgart, hasn't he? He's an interesting one. That's the trouble. There isn't anybody really obvious at the moment. Glasner, not a good day this morning to be talking about that. Potentially him, having won the Europa League. Has he got the aura, the presence? Is there anybody to tick all those boxes at the moment? You can see why Gary says Ancelotti. You can, but he'd want his son with him, wouldn't he?
you can see that. I do think they've got to try for the best, the Man United. So they try for Luis Enrique, and they try, if they're going domestic, they try for Unai Emery, because they're not going to get Arteta or Guardiola. Or they try for Thomas Tuchel, and that's where you begin your search.
I mean, Tuchel was quite close in 2024, and he felt like if we are talking about this issue of being able to carry the weight of a club like that, he maybe feels it close to him or Luis Enrique, I suppose. Especially, there are murmurs now that Luis Enrique will maybe leave Paris Saint-Germain at the end of the season, and it's a very different Luis Enrique, I think, from even 5 years ago when clubs like Chelsea were interested, United thought about, because winning that Champions League at Paris Saint-Germain, I think, it's evolved his career and also maybe his outlook as well.
Just very, very quickly, Jackie, before we leave United and go to a break, the Sun on Sunday talks about a potential exit in the summer for Bruno Fernandes, with teammates fearing that he will leave come the summer. Would that surprise you? And is that maybe something United need to start thinking about now, given his age and given the amount of money they could potentially get for him, and then reinvest with the new manager?
Well, it depends what the bigger plan is in terms of, it's impossible to tell now, isn't it? Because he's such a key figure for them at the moment. But if they have a completely new revamp with a new midfield, Adam Wharton has been linked, rightly so. I think he'd be fabulous there. But maybe he can play in, the 210s with Cunha behind the striker. I think it all depends on who they want to bring in the summer. But if he were to go, not a huge surprise. But if he stays, regardless what happens, it needs a whole revamp, particularly in the midfield area.
Only one place to start. That is talking. Did you want to not talk about Man United?
I did.
Is that what
I think that's probably why.
Let's come to the S. Ruben Amorim sacked by the club after 14 months in charge. Huge news. This. We're going to do an in-depth dive into Man United, talk about potential candidates. Before we do that, what are your thoughts when you heard the news?
A little surprised, because as poor as maybe results have been, I did kind of think they were going to give him till the end of the season. I wasn't really of the opinion until that big press conference before and after Leeds kind of came out, and you could feel that there was a bit of a falling out between himself and members of the board. So maybe in terms of that sense, the writing was on the wall, but honestly, I think this is probably the correct decision. I know that the fan base is a bit split down the middle in terms of should this bode worse on the board than it is on him or vice versa, but I think when you take everything into context, the win record, the style of play, the falling out with some of the players at the time, I don't think this was really going in the direction that most of us thought it was going to go in. And ultimately, I think in hindsight, he was probably a bit fortunate he didn't get fired last season. But now I guess the big question is, where does the club go forward with an interim and then eventually a permanent manager?
Yeah, quite good. From a sort of neutral standpoint, obviously, yes, talking as a United fan, what do you make of the whole situation, how it unfolded this week?
I think Amrim, he knew the writing was on the wall, right? And I think his press conferences have got increasingly antagonistic. But I think the timing is strange because he could have gone after the Grimsby game. The optics weren't great, the result wasn't great. He could have gone after the Europa League final loss against Spurs. The fact that he's gone after an alleged disagreement with Jason Wilcox, I think is, I don't know. I don't know if it bodes well for the board. I don't know if it bodes well for the next permanent manager, but ultimately it was the right decision.
You think it was the right call?
Yeah, it was the right decision. The results have been terrible. This has been the worst Man United team in the last 40, 50 years. He had to go, but now they're in the difficult position of replacing him, and the interim manager they're bringing now, and then the permanent manager for next season.
I think that's the big question here, right? Sorry, thereof. Like, I think, yes, it was the right decision, but do we trust the board to now make the correct decision? Because they're also the ones that hired him. They're also the ones that gave Ten Hag an extension at the time and then fired him. So really the question is, do we trust the board to make the right decision here?
Well, it looks like they're going to go for an interim manager. Before we come on to your permanent managers, let's quickly discuss that option because we've seen Michael Carrick's name linked, we've seen Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's name linked, Darren Fletcher, who's currently in charge. What are you looking at for the next few months? And is it the right decision to go caretaker?
Yeah, I mean, I was listening to David Ornstein the other day, and he was saying he expects the managerial market to explode over the summer, and I think rightfully so. People will be out of a job. There'll be managers leaving their countries after managing the World Cup. I think it becomes a whole lot more interesting when you fast forward 6 months. So I think the correct decision is probably to go with someone for the next few months just to get us to that point. Between Ollie and Carrick, I think those are the two realistic appointments that we could go for. I'm not really fussed either way. I think both of them hold the same amount of risk as they do reward. I don't see one of them as being much more qualified for the job, but despite Ollie already being a caretaker manager here, it's a vastly different team. He won't even have his assistant coaches that he did the first time around. So honestly, I'm not too fussed either way we go. I can see pros and cons of either of them.
In terms of Manchester United, though, it's an emotional football club. And we saw when Ollie got the job on an interim basis initially, Ollie's at the wheel, got the job full time. And then the writing looked like it was on the wall for Ten Hag. It looked like he was going to be sacked. You win the FA Cup, give him the job or extend his contract. And so I look at Manchester United and you can say it's an interim manager right now, but if you go on a little cheeky run in the FA Cup, if you go well in the league, there's no reason for me to believe that you won't give that manager the job full time. And that's why when you look at the options, you should go for somebody that you can see being there beyond the end of the season.
So do you think a caretaker for a short period of time is a mistake?
I think that's what they're going to do. I don't think it's a mistake, but I think if you're a Man United fan, you have to look at the history and realistically, if you play well under this interim manager, there'll be fans who'll be calling for this manager who they already have an emotional attachment to. But this is where you
have to hope that the board can look past fan sentiment and look past emotion and make the best footballing decision, which they haven't been able to do so far.
So on that, Quakey, just quickly, you think if it is Ollie that has the caretaker role, do you think there's a chance if he does well that he could end up becoming the permanent manager again?
For sure. It's Manchester United. There's a reason why these interim managers are all ex-players. There's an emotional attachment to. There's almost like an old boys club sentiment at Manchester United.
That's rich coming from it. Didn't you guys bring Lampard in as an interim at one point as well, too, after firing him the first time?
It was a mistake. But he's doing really well at Coventry. But I just look at Manchester United and I can see them. The league is weak right now. And Man United can feasibly finish in the top four. And if you do that under Carrick or you do that under Ollie, there'll be Manchester United fans that'll be calling for that manager to stay permanently.
I won't be one of them.
Well, let's talk about the permanent position then.
Yeah.
Because we have tasked you with becoming Jason Wilcox to some level.
That is not a job I want right now, by the way.
And picking the next permanent Manchester United manager. You've got 5 candidates to bring to the table, 5 through to 1. Let's start in that 5th spot because there's kind of 2 names you were going back and forth on. Right? And they were Ollie Glasner and
Andoni Iraola.
And you've sided with?
Iraola. Let me preface this by saying this. I'm not really 100% sold on either of these guys. In fact, I think every manager that I have on this list comes with their own doubts and uncertainties, simply because at Man United, there's bigger issues than the manager. But I've been tasked with a job here, so I'm going to do it to the best of my ability. I'm Wilcox in this situation. The reason I went for Iraola over Glasner is simply because I think there is a chance that Iraola's football scales higher. It scales better at a bigger club, right? When you look at how most elite football clubs or clubs that have elite aspirations want to play, it is more often than not in the Iraola fashion rather than the Glasner fashion. I think Glasner's done a fantastic job at Palace, and in fact, he's doing a better job this season than Iraola is. But I just don't know if his football can scale correctly at a Man United or at a Liverpool or at a Manchester City. Whereas Iraola, who has had his issues this season, I look when his football is really at its free-flowing best. It is an absolute joy to watch. It's very modern, in my opinion, in terms of when you're talking about the press, when you're talking about the passing out from the back, when you're talking about how high intensity it is. And I have to give him some credit as well, too. Despite the poor run of form that they were on this season, previous to beating you guys, of course.
Thanks, mate.
You have to take into consideration as well, too, that when he had his side last season, before it was decimated in the transfer window, these guys were one of the most entertaining teams in the league. They were going to the big six grounds and winning left, right, and center. They beat United 3-0, I think 2 seasons in a row or something like that. They were a joy to watch. So I'm not too certain on either of these guys. I think they both carry their own risks. I think Glasner's probably more set in terms of personality to manage a bigger club. But I give the edge slightly to Iraola.
Of the two, because obviously, and I agree with a lot of what you're saying in terms of on the eye, Bournemouth are a fantastic team when it works to watch. Flip side to that is Glasner's delivered major silverware at a lot of clubs. He's been at Europa League, Frankfurt, FA Cup, first trophy in Crystal Palace's history for Palace. Who do you think would be a better fit for Man United out of the two?
I think Iraola would fit the model that Manchester United are going with at the moment. I think you want a manager that's malleable, a manager that isn't too disruptive, isn't too cantankerous, and I think that's more Iraola, and it's more about the X's and O's. He's a manager. Oliver Glasner's a manager, and I don't think you'll be given those reins at Manchester United, and I think he's vocal when things don't go his way. He will be vocal about it, and I think for what Manchester United and the direction they're going at the moment, I'll say Iraola.
OK, stick him down at 5. Then don't forget this is going in reverse order, so we're going to culminate with who Lias wants as number 1. So this is your list, not prediction. It's what you want. And number 1 is your favourite. So let's look at your 4th pick. Who you gone with?
Again, all of these guys carry their own uncertainties. And De Zerbi, I could almost definitely see it one day ending in tears, because this is, in my opinion, one of the most volatile managers in the game. He is of the Antonio Conte mold. However, I think one thing is undeniable. This guy is an elite coach, right? When it comes to the X's and O's, when it comes to setting your team up, I think this guy's track record, the amount of people that have vouched for him as being as innovative when it comes to building out from the back, and again, playing a style of football that can just wow you, I think he's unquestionable. Like the way Guardiola has raved about this guy and said how many times he's taken inspiration in terms of his tactics, it is sensational. I think, again, the only question with De Zerbi is when is he going to just explode, right? When is he going to fall out with somebody? Even at Marseille last season, I think he threatened to quit 3 months into the job. But there is no question, when this guy can get his team clicking, they are one of the most exciting watches in football. And he's had a very successful time at Marseille as well, too. Brighton, at one point, they were everybody's favorite team outside of the top 6, playing some fantastic football. Develops players quite well as well, too.
Pretty sure led them to the highest ever finish.
Got them to an FA Cup semi-final as well, too.
Unlucky to lose.
And that team played some honestly, some of the best football you will have seen in the league at that point.
Where do you stand on Roberto De Zerbi and the fit for Man United?
I agree with you in terms of the X's and O's, in terms of the way he gets his teams playing, one of the most exciting managers in the world, but it's personality with him as well. And we saw at Brighton, we've seen it in various jobs that he is prone to blowing up, and that's not necessarily what Manchester United need right now. But in terms of manager that's going to get you playing, and I think Man United is an interesting football club where the results do matter, but the way you get results matters even more. He'll play the Manchester United way, whatever that is, and he will get fans off their seats. But I don't think he will be a fit.
I completely agree. I chose De Zerbi as well too, because when I look at United, I don't see it as much as when Mourinho left and we needed someone to, again, manage the group and get everyone's spirits up. I look at us having a severe coaching issue. And that's why I've also looked at managers who I think, they can elevate the coaching, the tactical level of this side, which I think he could do.
Where do you stand at the moment on this sort of sporting director to head coach to manager battle? Because you mentioned there about the manager and how well he's going to clash, and De Zerbi blowing up, and it's a big narrative at the moment, isn't it? Especially amongst Chelsea fans, Manchester United fans. This manager, even we heard Amorim as he was exiting, I came here to be the manager, not the head coach.
I find that ironic, and I find it a little hypocritical of any Man United fan to now be complaining that we have a sporting director, because this was a claim, this was something that we were crying out for years. Even under Erik ten Hag, people were saying, Erik ten Hag has too much responsibility. He shouldn't be in charge of the transfers. We need a sporting director. Guardiola has been working under Cheeky now for the last 20 years at Barcelona and City. Arteta works under sporting directors. This is modern day football. Now, there has to be a good relationship between the two of them. Like I said, Guardiola and Cheeky, they've known each other for a very long time. And clearly, there was not that between Amorim and his superiors. But I'm sorry, this is where the game is going now. So I find it a little hypocritical for anyone to complain about it now.
Okay, stick it on.
Let's go to number 3 on your list then, and this is where we start to enter World Cup territory potentially.
I think it's where we start to enter world-class territory as well.
And this goes back to what you were saying, listening to Ornstein, about the level of manager you think will become available after the World Cup.
100%. This is my first real, everyone has uncertainties, but now I'm starting to get a little bit more certain. Julian Nagelsmann. Now, I think his reputation for some reason has been a little bit smeared since he left Bayern Munich. But I don't really understand why. His win rate there was fantastic, over 70%.
Yeah.
And people will say, oh, it's Bayern. Of course it is. But I think it's very important to take context into account here. That Bayern team was coming towards the end of their dynasty, and it showed when Tuchel came in, and they narrowly won the league the next season on the final day, and then got smoked in the league the following season against Leverkusen. And really, Company came in and has aided this rebuild of Bayern and to bring them back to the top of European football. But I think this was a Bayern team that were on the decline, and he still managed fantastic results. That's one thing. He's managed at a big club. He's got experience working in a high-pressure environment. Bayern is as big as it gets in European football. Then you look at the style of play as well, too. I think since he broke onto the scene, whether it was with Hoffenheim, then with Leipzig, now with Bayern Munich as well, too, in the German national team, he has always been known for an exciting, progressive, modern style of play. In terms of the press, he's always been known for that. The build-up, the style, the goals they score. I think this guy right here, you talk about the United style way, the United DNA. I think this is the kind of football that Man United fans would want to see.
Yeah, he's a manager you can buy into as well. He's young. Yeah. He's unconventional as well in terms of the way he goes about things. I was a little bit disappointed with Germany at the Euros, home Euros. I think.
But the only team that beat them was Spain, who ended up beating everybody.
Yeah, I think that Spain team's a little bit overrated. In honesty, yeah, definitely. I feel like England should have beaten that Spain team, and I think that Germany should have beaten that Spain team as well. But he's a good manager, and I feel like you said, you're heading to world-class territory. You've got questions about Iraola, got questions about De Zerbi, you've got a few questions about Nagelsmann.
Got a whole lot less.
He's an upper echelon manager.
My first point, though, is going to be, obviously, Nagelsmann, he's worked with Vivell before, so that's a positive.
Yeah.
But with the World Cup, the dates of it, Julian Nagelsmann, if he goes deep in that World Cup, potentially doesn't arrive to United until the end of July, 2-3 weeks before a Premier League season starts, missing an entire pre-season, missing an entire transfer period. The same can be said of potential managers coming up. But how does that work when United are trying to pre-plan for an entire season when they don't have a manager in charge for the whole pre-season?
I think that's something we're going to have to compromise here, because again, when you look at the quality and also the gap in quality, with all due respect to the other guys I've named here, between managers who could be available post-World Cup and managers who are available a lot earlier than the World Cup, you give and take here. For the amount of time they'd have available to train the squad in preseason, the take here is that you're talking about bona fide winners. You're talking about prestigious managers here. So what do you kind of value more here in this situation? I think here we got to go with best in class, and I think that's the three managers I've named here.
Okay, let's go to top two then. So,
there you go.
Who have you got at two, Lias?
Thomas Tuchel. And I actually think it's the most likely appointment.
Do you?
My prediction is that I think Thomas Tuchel post-World Cup will no longer be England manager. Whether that's he's lost at the tournament and maybe decided that, look, I've taken this group where I only signed to the World Cup anyways. Or he wins the whole thing and he goes out a national hero and it's like, okay, I'm one and done and I'm out of here.
So whatever happens to England,
my prediction is
Thomas Tuchel will no longer be England manager?
And I would even go one step further. I think Eddie Howe will be the manager of England. So I think that's kind of where the footballing world is kind of. I think Eddie Howe by this time next year will be England manager, and I think Thomas Tuchel will be a free man. Now, if you cast your mind back to when Ineos first took over at Man United, this was Jim Ratcliffe's favorite guy. This was his guy that he wanted at the helm. He had just left Bayern Munich. Erik ten Hag was on the ropes. He interviewed him first and foremost. And he told him, I'm looking to take a break post-management, which is eventually why we went to other candidates and then stuck with Ten Hag. But I think if Ratcliffe had his way, this would have been the Man United manager. And who knows what the situation looks like. But again, you're talking about prestige, pedigree, experience, winning. This guy ticks. This is a bona fide world-class manager. And he's shown as well, too. He can come into groups, into teams where you think it's a bit disjointed. Quaker will tell you himself, what he did at Chelsea is to this day, for me, remarkable when you look at how that club was being run at the time. Yeah, I think this guy, I think he's versatile as well, too, so I'm a fan of Tuchel.
Let's bring you in as a Chelsea fan, know a lot about him, obviously won the Champions League, the 9 major trophies as a manager. Firstly, 2 points I want to pick you up on there. Do you agree with what Lias is saying, that he will no longer be England manager after the World Cup, or do you think differently? No,
I completely agree. His contract runs to the end of the World Cup. Yeah. I don't think he'll renew that contract. I think if England win the World Cup, like you say, he goes out in a blaze of glory. If England don't win the World Cup, then he hasn't done his job, he hasn't achieved his goal, and he leaves regardless. So I agree with that point for sure. I think he's a manager that has got clear intentions, clear goals, and when he achieves them, he moves on. And I look at him as a manager that would be great at Manchester United, but what he's shown an inability to do at all of his previous clubs is manage upwards. At PSG, at Borussia Dortmund, at Chelsea, falling out with the hierarchy. Yeah. And so that's the only question I have with Thomas Tuchel. I absolutely love Tommy T. I will never forget 2021, coming in midway through the season and transforming that Chelsea team that looked like they were going nowhere to champions of Europe for the second time in my history. But his ability to manage upwards is a concern. And I think that with Manchester United and how you are being run sporting directors, nobody can come in and dictate terms with Thomas Tuchel. He will dictate terms.
Yeah, but I think, and I'm not going to spend too much time on the last one because I think it's the most unrealistic one. I think Tuchel is the most realistic one. But one thing I will say, because I completely agree with you, he has a history of falling out with his superiors. But what Man United also needs as a manager, or as a coach even, is a strong-willed man. Honestly, you need somebody who can come in here and who has the character as well too to tell people around him, this is what we're doing. You need to be so strong-willed to manage at a club like at this stature. And I think that's a bit where Amorim almost fell out, to be honest with you.
Amorim said that he came in to be Manchester United manager, not head coach. Is he going to come in and be Manchester United manager, or is he head coach?
That's a big question.
I think it's a question that needs answering as well. Like that role, when it was defined and we saw the announcement for Ruben Amorim, we saw the press release for Ruben Amorim, it was very much head coach, and obviously there was movement behind the scenes at that stage, wasn't there? I think whether Thomas Tuchel comes in as manager or head coach is big for Manchester United. Could you imagine him coming in as just head coach?
I think it's a valid question, and it's one that I asked David Ornstein myself when I was on a show with him the other day, and he says he thinks he can understand skepticism, of course, because guys of this stature want to come in and have a lot of power, a lot of say. But he thinks that it's also a little bit overstated because, again, most clubs these days are operating with a sporting director working alongside the coach. I think there just, again, has to be a good relationship between sporting director and manager. That's a big thing here.
Okay. Yeah, let's think about, I think we can all agree, top manager Thomas Tuchel. Let's go with who you want. Number one then. So this is who Lias wants as the next permanent Man United manager.
I might as well have just put Sir Alex on here as well, too. I think it's as likely as this one. I mean, there was a small report from Bild that was ultimately proven to maybe be a bit hyperbolic, but Luis Enrique potentially leaving the job in the summer. Nothing is for sure certain. They're just rumors. Some of them might not even be true, but I'm allowed to dream here, right? This is a show. Yeah. Luis Enrique, I think, again, an unquestionable world-class manager, one who's shown that, again, he can also work with a sporting director, working side by side with Luis Campos at PSG. But again, when you're talking about what you want to see from a Man United side, pressing from the front, intensity, good passing movement, good play, attacking, positive.
Appreciation of midfield.
And appreciate, that's something, any of these nominees I just put forward, they need to address the midfield first and foremost. and I'm talking about ball players, I'm not talking about ball winners. He's just a world-class manager, maybe even arguably the best manager in the world over the last 12, 18 months.
Can you see that happening? Obviously, the pool of Manchester United is huge, one of the biggest clubs in the world. Yeah. There'll be a host of names that want to go to Man United, of course there will. Yeah. But the job that he's doing now is he's managing one of the best teams in world football. He's got an amazing gig where he's at PSG. Can you see that move happening?
Yeah, I can. I actually can. His contract runs until 2027.
Yeah.
I can see it happening because Manchester United still have that pull. It's still Manchester United. Yeah. And so, he's a manager that has done things his own way. And I think he's definitely been validated with the job that he's done at PSG. I feel like when he won the treble at Barcelona, there was a feeling of you've got the best players in the world. You've got MSN. But the job he did at PSG with no real standout superstars has validated him as a manager. Style of play, check. Mentality, personality, check. It's whether he wants to come to Manchester United that are in flux right now. But if you can get him, he's the best option out of all those five managers.
Okay, so that's who you want, Luis Enrique. Who do you think it will be?
Honestly, Thomas Tuchel. I think Thomas Tuchel will be Man United manager at the start of next season.
Okay.
So do I.
Your thoughts on that as United fans?
Yeah, I think it's a really good list. I think Luis Enrique, obviously dream, but probably I think Thomas Tuchel as well is pretty much the perfect selection.
There we have that. Enjoyed that. There is confirmation. The board will remind you of it one more time. That is Lias's top 5 managerial picks for Manchester United. Sitting on the top of the tree, Luis Enrique is who he'd like, who he thinks is Thomas Tuchel. Enjoyed that, mate.
You seem to have worked wonders with Benjamin Sesko in 48 hours. Just how much potential do you see in this squad? Obviously, it's been quite a tough season so far. How much potential do you see in for you or the next person coming along? How much can they draw from this kind of squad of players now?
Well, first of all, I think Ben, he's the one who crosses the white line. He done it for himself. So let's look. We showed some video, but Ben's been working really, really hard. He's a diligent lad. He trains well. He reviews his games meticulously. So he's been striving for that moment. I'm just fortunate that it came in the game that I was taking charge of. So I'm more than happy for him. There's lots of potential in this squad, and I think potential is a good word because you can see some young players who are learning their trade and developing at Manchester United under the biggest microscope, under the most intense pressure. So within that, they'll have to learn quickly, but they'll have to develop a thick skin and deal with the pressures that come with that. But I said it the other day, that's Manchester United, and as quickly as they can learn to deal with that, accept that, we have to help them. Experienced players have to help them, coaches, staff have to help them, managers have to help them, everyone in the club has to help them. The biggest thing for me is the fan support. that's there on the pitch, understanding of these things. But I can't question any of that, because the fans away from home the other night and in the home stadium, I think they've been fantastic with the players. So if you take it in isolation on match day, I think the players are in a good environment to improve and to learn and to keep developing.
Samuel and then Stephen. Hi Darren. I don't know if you remember saying this, but after Jose was sacked and I came in, you said the club risked writing off the season by hiring a caretaker. Now I'm not expecting you to say that's going to be the case here and you're entitled to change your mind, but do you think that there needs to be some clarity on who's going to be in charge for the rest of the season sooner rather than later?
It's good research, that. I was young and naive when I said that, wasn't I? No, that was my feeling at the time. And I was thinking, speaking in context of probably being out of the game and not involved in it from the inside. I think the most important thing for me is it's not my decision, and ultimately the club need to do what they think's best. The people in the higher up in the roles in the club, they need to do what they think's best. They need to know what their plan is going forward for the success of Manchester United, and I'm sure they'll do that. I think that they'll be strong enough to think to accept and to deal with that pressure and to make the right decision for what's best for them and for what Manchester